It's been reported that the Colorado Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump will not be on the 2024 ballot. Um, I think that's good news, but I'm also aware that that will just fuel the Trump cultists. It will just fuel this notion that there's some sort of witch hunt. Now, the rationale for that is the fact that he directly incited the events of January the 6th, 2021. Um, you know, Not just Trump followers, but others who don't necessarily support Trump, but they would be on the right of things, think that the events of January the 6th are overblown. 5 people died. There have been far deadlier events in American history. But it's the implications of that. I mean, that event was unprecedented since 1814, since we, the British, burned the White House down. There has not been an attack on the Capitol since 1814. And whatever people want to call it, a riot, an insurrection, um, that event was significant. Um, I've just watched an interview with Tony Schwartz on MSNBC. I believe it was MSNBC. Tony Schwartz was the co-author of The Art of the Deal. Now, I actually have that book, The Art of the Deal. Picked this up at charity shop, 50 pence. Um, I loathe Trump, but could make for interesting reading to see what goes on in his mind. Anyway, Schwartz says that there is a really real threat here. There is a threat that Trump should be believed when he says these things. He was with Hannity. Now Hannity's hardly a left winger. Sean Hannity, pretty controversial character himself, and he asked Trump, "Is it not?" Should you not tone it down so as not to kind of give ammo to the other side? That's not verbatim, but that's what he was saying. Now, Donald Trump doubled down. Yeah, I think the question was, would you seek retribution if you got into a position of power? Would you abuse power by seeking retribution? Trump, without shame, to rile up his audience, said on day one, or not until day one. In other words, he would seek retribution. Then he went into the immigration thing as if it was a policy area. Um, these ongoing trials, there's absolutely no evidence that they're being pushed by the Biden White House. Rather, independent judiciary. It's This is the problem with a cult. It's they don't care about facts. They don't care about empirical evidence. In their mind, it's just one big massive conspiracy against their cult leader. Um, In this interview, it emerged that Donald Trump more or less praised the Tiananmen Square crackdown in an article in 1990. Now, he called it terrible and brutal, but then he claimed that the Chinese Communist Party showed great strength. Now, this reminds me of the things he said about Putin, where he called on the very day of the invasion of Ukraine. It was a genius move. Now, even if his apologists want to say, oh, this is just the way Donald Trump speaks and he doesn't really admire dictators, even if that's the case, even if it's clumsy language, what does that do for morale? What sort of message would that send out to the world? Those who would see America as a beacon of freedom and hope when the potential president of that country is basically praising foreign tyrants. Now, you could get any administration and there will be, cooperation with tyrants. I mean, Biden cooperates with the Saudis, and so is most American presidents. And there's other examples. But there's a difference between doing it as a matter of diplomacy and realpolitik versus actually having a worldview that admires these people, and Donald Trump does. Um, I actually think, controversial as his first term was, I actually think his second term could be worse in the sense that if he gets into power, God forbid, but if he does, I do think he'll seek retribution. I think he will try to go after the Democrats hard. Um, not in terms of policy, not in terms of disagreements. I think he will find ways to do what he can, and not just against the Democrats. I think he will go against members of his own party. This is not politics as usual. You know, there's apparently something emerging in the hard right in the American hard right, red Caesarism, for want of a better term, whereby there's this notion that Donald Trump could actually become a sort of Caesar-like figure. In other words, a dictator. Um, and this idea, oh, it can't happen. It's America. That can't happen. Well, Germany was a dictator. Was excuse me, a democracy, a flawed one, but was a democracy when Hitler came to power. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump will be Hitler. That can become a cliche, and I think we should be cautious about those sort of analogies on the grounds that the Hitler dictatorship was somewhat unique. Also, I think it just gives ammo to his supporters. But dictatorships don't just emerge from failed states, or they can emerge from sophisticated democracies. I do think America's in a very bad way right now. I think Biden, like I said before, his age shows. I think it's a big mistake for him to run for re-election. I think he should, pave way for a younger candidate. Um, I don't know, someone like Gavin Newsom, or there's others, but I think there will be Democrats who will start to get concerned that Biden is a liability. He's an average president at best. His age shows, and when it's going up against someone like Donald Trump, that's it's a potential liability, because I think Biden's a decent man fundamentally. He has flaws, but I think he's probably I genuinely think he's a decent man. But does he have the strength to take on Trump a second time? I don't know. I don't know. 4 years is a long time in politics, especially for someone who's in his 80s. And I just think that at the moment, Trump's leading a lot of polls. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's dangerous, because even if Trump loses, I think it's very, very plausible that some of his followers will resort to violence. I think that's very, very plausible. I mean, January the 6th shows that. It's and 5 people died that day. 4 of them were, you know, themselves. The one police officer who lost his life, shows what can happen. But I think that there's a real danger. Violence on the streets. I think the divide is worse than it's ever been. I think Biden needs to reach out to the centre ground. I think one mistake the Democrats have made, they've made lots, but I think one big mistake is they have pandered far too much to the woke left. They need to be pandering or pitching more to moderates, including moderate conservatives. I mean, there are a few decent Republicans, Mitt Romney, Chris Christie. They don't enjoy big support at the moment. But even Mike Pence, and it shouldn't be forgotten that Pence was a big part of the Trump project right up until the end. He finally done the decent thing, and took the side of the Constitution. But um, I just don't know where this will go. I'm concerned, because when I look at comments on the internet with Donald Trump, universally it's along the lines of it's a witch hunt against him, and they will find anything to frame him on, and there's no evidence, except there is. There is substantial evidence to show that Donald Trump is a liar, to show that Donald Trump doesn't respect democracy. Um, and, I think people should believe him when he says, I will be a dictator on day one. This isn't just, him being flippant with words. I think he means it. I think Trump is a wannabe dictator. And I cannot think in modern times any president that has come close. I mean, Nixon and Bush done controversial things, so did Lyndon Johnson. But Nixon resigned. I honestly think even Richard Nixon was a Democrat compared to Donald Trump. And, Nixon was corrupt. But I think this man is dangerous, and I think if he, even if he doesn't get back into the White House, even if Biden wins re election, if that's close, And frankly, even if it isn't close, because his followers have shown that they they don't accept democracy either. So where does this go? I'll put a link to the video here, but there's like a collective lack of objectivity with Trump supporters. Their mindset is basically he can do no wrong, or if they ever do concede his faults, it's that well, he's a bit silly with his words, but they cannot see the obvious here, or they simply don't care. Maybe they hate the Democrats and the mainstream media so much that they're kind of prepared to put up with Trump's foibles. But as Schwartz said, even if you advocate for the dictatorship, it still doesn't change the fact it's a dictatorship. And again, history shows that people, who support the rise of dictators ended up regretting it. There will be some people who vote for Trump in 2016 who now regret it, but there's that hardcore base, and there. When you have ignorance and stupidity combined with a kind of conviction, it's a very dangerous thing. Um, but yeah, it's up to Americans to decide what happens, but this has implications on the rest of the world. And it will be to the eternal shame of British politicians if they pander to this. If on, Inauguration Day 2025, if there's more violence, or if Trump does get re-election, or if he becomes president again. It's only happened once, an inconsistent second term, that was Grover Cleveland. But if this happens and Trump really starts bringing in dictatorial policies, I don't know what form that will take. But if British leaders, whoever's prime minister at that time, probably will be Keir Starmer, and I think Starmer will do the right thing. But if somehow the Tories win re-election, there are some Tories who have failed to condemn Trump's excesses. Um, I think we should really, well, we'll see what happens at that time. Anyway, I'll put a link to the video. That's my thoughts. No doubt there'll be a lot more to say on this subject as time goes on.